Hello, friends. I'm DJ Lance Rock, and I have to say, Rock and Roll Grad School is awesome!
This is Rock and Roll Grad School with your hosts, Heidi Hedquist and Luke Poling. All their favorite songs are slow and sad.
Hello, kiddies. We are going to have a real good time together because we are talking with Jock from Firefall. It was a lovely conversation. They have a new record out, a Friends and Family, I guess, sort of tribute cover album. And here's the thing, I think I said to him off mic or off recording, you look at these cover records that people do, and it's pretty much you're going to get the same song every time. Here's where I will give them credit. I'm going down the list and it says, the band. I'm like, all right. So it's going to be The Wait or I Shall Be Released, right? Firefall? No. Chest Fever.
I mean,
you got to give him credit for that.
That is absolutely worthy. And there's other good ones on there. It's good. It's good stuff.
It does. But just, there's sometimes if someone's going to do a Stones song, you're going to hear one of 5 songs.
Of course.
It was just great to see that they went a little bit above and beyond.
I totally agree.
I feel like we're in the fun part of fall. Not just because it's our birthday month.
True.
But like this is when all the good movies come out. This is when all the good records come out.
This is true. All the good books. Don't forget.
All the good books. Yes.
All the bios.
But it just feels like this fall, there's some really good albums and folks we are talking to for the show. That's our friend Chan will be back on from the
Blues Traveler.
Traveling Bluesman. And that's the only example I can think of off the top of my head. No, we have others.
We have many others.
Yes. Well, because this week we have Jock from Firefall.
Yes.
Which is lovely.
He was very cool.
Yeah. Tom Paxton, folk legend.
Yes.
And the Baseball Project.
I mean, there's a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of good music coming up.
Yeah.
So. And then I believe Roger Waters' new version of Dark Side of the Moon is coming out.
Oh.
So we can all look forward to not buying that.
Right. Yes. Continuing our quest to.
Yes. Well, in Eric Clapton, I think I sent you the photo. He's really trying to surge ahead in Dink of the Year.
Yeah. He wants to keep that title. He wants like a trophy worthy plate upon plate upon plate every year.
Yes, because he played at a $2,000 or $4,000 a plate fundraiser for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Noted anti-vaxxer. Here's the thing. Stephen Stills was also on that bill. I feel like for some reason he gets a little bit of a pass. I don't know why.
Well, okay. This is his first sort of that we're aware of.
This is strike one, certainly.
Like it was right. So, yeah. And again, we're not political.
No, not a political show.
And I know many people who have found that the vaccine was not appropriate for them health-wise or had some reactions. Results may vary. So it's just there's a lot of things with Bobby over here. It's not just the.
Yeah, this is true. He's way too shredded for someone his age.
True.
Nothing musical, but worth noting.
No, roidy.
Yeah, I don't know. I just Eric Clapton is really kind of
because every year, and he used to be cool.
He used to be so cool.
So cool.
He's one of the people in the Hall of Fame the most.
Right.
For solo, for Cream certainly in. I think are Derek and the Dominoes? They must be.
They have to be.
They should be. I don't think Blind Faith is, but I could see them getting in
at some point.
It's just. Plus, he's a great answer to the trivia question: who plays the guitar solo on While My Guitar Gently
Weeps? I mean, of course.
The reason why, oh, I can't say. I have to let you go, babe, and run away. After what you did, I can't stay on.
To me, your music has always had a sound of a bunch of guys sitting around. In my vision, you're sitting around a campfire playing these songs, and this sort of just, you know, a group of musicians hanging out, just having a good time. And this record, the tracks you're doing, the connections between all the members of the bands and the people you're covering, it just seems like you're taking that campfire motif and putting it on record. And I may just be, this might be a whole fantasy that I'm dreaming up.
No. I kind of have thought about it more as like the back porch, you know, maybe not so much a campfire, but
cooler, you know, certainly.
Firefall
I
songs
had
have
it on
always.
the beach, so.
Oh, on the beach. Oh, yeah, there you go. I'll tell you what, it was amazing, and how this record came about, this Friends and Family record came about a year and a half ago. Our manager, who's also our record label, called me and said, you know, the original band, the original Firefall guys, many of you all played in other famous bands like the Byrds and the Flying Burrito Brothers and Spirit, JoJo Gunn, Hart, Dan Fogelberg, in my case, Graham Parsons. You know, why don't you make an album of just their songs? And as soon as he said that, I went, that's a great idea. But let's expand it a little bit, because in 1976, when our first album came out and then just started gangbusters, and we had hits out of the box, and suddenly we're touring with most of the best bands of the world, I said, in 76, we played with Fleetwood Mac, the Doobie Brothers, Lynyrd Skynyrd, Marshall Tucker, Loggins and Messina, you know, why the band? Oh my God, Levon Helm and Robbie Robertson and the boys, the band. Why don't we include those guys, the bands that we toured with, and in a lot of cases got to be friends with, and do a song of theirs too? And he said, great idea. Now, the thing is, of course, is that as soon as that concept started becoming reality, I knew that there was a lot of responsibility to that from our end, and that we had to pick the songs very carefully. You know, like for instance, when Lynn heard that we toured with the band on their last tour before they went out and made the last waltz and broke up, he said, oh, great, you guys can do Up on Cripple Creek. And I went, no friggin' way. You know, no, I said, Levon Helm is about the only guy that really should sing that song, right? And, you know, we had to pick very carefully. A few of the songs were an obvious choice, and I didn't have to think about it more than about 10 seconds, which was Angry Eyes by Loggins and Messina. That was so up our wheelhouse and what we sounded like already. But for instance, and Mark Andes, the original Firefall bassist, who retired about 3 months before we were going to start making this record, I was like, we need a bass player and a singer. And our new lead singer, bass player, John Bisaha, who also plays in the Babies, and is a fantastic singer. And the Babies only play like 6 or 7 gigs a year, so hey, he can be in 2 bands at once. He said to me when I had no idea what song by heart would be appropriate. You know, the Wilson sisters, you know, somebody suggested, how about Barracuda? And I went, nope, hands off. We can't do Barracuda. That's not one.
No pressure on Barracuda.
That one. John Bisaha said to me, John said to me, you know, I could sing really good. What about Love? And I went, oh, okay, that sounds good. And we picked that one. And what's interesting about the Heart song.
That's awesome.
Oh man, yeah, it's great. What's interesting about that one, I'm really still good friends with Howard Leese, the one of the guitar players from the original Heart, and for the last 10 years he's been playing with Paul Rogers and Bad Company. I asked Howard, and he's good friends with John Bisaha from LA, our new singer. I asked Howard, hey man, do you want to play on our remake of this record? And he said, sure. And I said, so why don't you add some power guitars to the choruses? And if you want, you can play the solo. And he listened to what I sent him. We did it all by email. And he said, well, yeah, but you know, you changed the chords a little bit in the solo. So I can't really play the same solo that he so brilliantly played on the Heart original version of What About Love. And I said, I don't want you to play the original. Come up with something new. And so Howard was one of the guest stars on this record and played the solo, which I ended up with my guitar sound and the power of my guitar playing. I learned his solo. And so there's two Howards and one Jock playing a solo that sounds like one guy playing. But it was so great to have Howard play on our record. And also, for instance, I asked my friend John Jorgensen, who's one of the best guitar players in the world, if he wanted to play the 12-string part and the solo, the McGuinn solo on our Bird song, Feel a Whole Lot Better. And he said, sure. And I sent him our track, and he went in the studio and put the 12-string down. And it's great having some guest appearances on this record.
Yeah. And were these songs that you had played before? Were you learning them?
No.
You must have learned a lot about these various songwriters. They're all great songwriters, talented. Right. Like to just learn, you know, making your hands do those chord progressions and learning the keys they were in, going like, oh, okay, now you know, like that thing where there's every songwriter has that one little trick where it's like, oh, they always throw in an E minor. Well, wrap around that. And it must have been great to kind of break that stuff down and learn it in that way.
It was great to break it down. And I have to say that on some songs, like Part of the Plan by Dan Fogelberg, which was almost one of those hands-off kind of songs, you know, I kind of thought, you know, this would be good. We kept it really close to the original version of what Dan played. And as a lead guitar player, every one of these solos that I played, whether it be on the Fogelberg song or Toy Caldwell from Marshall Tucker or the Leonard Skinner kick-ass guitar players, and, you know, I wanted to not necessarily copy what they played, but I wanted in the front of my mind to be true to Toy Caldwell when we did, you know, Can't You See? But on the Fogelberg song, Dan's solo on that song was so perfect, and it just seemed like I should play his solo almost verbatim, which I did because it's so good. And it, you know, and it probably, you know, even if we tried to sound like the original version of some of these songs, it would have been a different singer, different guitar sounds, modern studio techniques instead of the 70s. So it would have been different, you know. So I kept, as producer, I kept a lot of these songs kind of in the ballpark, what people expected. But then on other songs, like, I didn't know which Doobie Brothers song to pick, you know, and of course, Listen to the Music was like, no, not that one, you know, and people started saying we should do Long Train Running. And I was hesitant because that guitar part by Tommy Johnson from the original version of the Doobies is the signature Doobie sound, you know. But the cool thing about when I started studying that song, once we'd picked it, there's two really great guitar parts in that. The number one prominent one is the one that I kind of wanted to lessen the impact on our version and have be a little lower volume. And I played as the primary lick in the song, the number two part. And then we added sax, and our version of Long Train Running, you know, is definitely different than the original. But the main thing, like we said in the liner notes on this, is we recorded each one of these songs with our new Firefall band with respect and love and, really wanting to do right by those bands, those writers, those singers, those bands, but also honor how great the music of the late 60s and early 70s were, because Firefall had the great fortune and great timing with our first and second and third record to be able to tour and be a small part of how great the music of the 70s was. So yay.
So good.
There we go. Oh, yeah, something to add, Heidi?
Sorry.
Nope.
Hey.
No, it's okay. I was agreeing.
Oh, yes. Okay.
You're driving.
I was agreeing with you.
How great. Hey,
I'm not.
safe
I
in
pulled
driving.
over. I did pull over.
Oh, you did?
I pulled over. That's why you can see me now. Yes, you couldn't see me when I was driving. I have pulled over. But my phone keeps ringing through, and that's why it keeps ruining everything I say. But you guys keep talking. I'm like, I just want to hang out with you and all your friends. I'm just listening to all this going, I just want to be there with you and all of them.
Oh, well, hi, Heidi. And I think when you turned your phone on to the Zoom here is like when things got choppy on our end, but we're good.
I think we're good. Yeah.
It's me. It's all my fault. Always.
And you're in Detroit area, right?
I am. Yes, I am.
Right. All right. I'm in Westminster, Colorado, beautiful Colorado, and it's great here.
Great snow fun. My aunts are right near you, so I know your area well.
Mm-hmm. Love it.
So in making this, how long did it take you to make the record? Like record it, basically?
Well, we have 3 guys in Colorado. Now, our original sax flute keyboard player, David Muse, sadly died about 2 years ago. Right. And our new flute sax guy replaced him a lot and has been in Firefall for 20 years when David wasn't available or getting sick or touring with Marshall Tucker, and Mark Andes, like I said, one of the best bassists of the world. He decided to retire about 2 or 3 months before we made this record. In answer to your question, I've got 3 guys in Colorado, 1 in Nashville, John, and our drummer Sandy lives up near Portland, Oregon. And surprisingly, some of this record was made via email. And for instance, and it's not the optimum way to make a record, obviously. It's great to have everybody in the studio and play the song and then do whatever you need to do. But for instance, on World Turnin' by Fleetwood Mac, which took me another while to figure out, well, which Fleetwood Mac song do we want to do?
Yeah.
Because there's some there that is like, no, not that one. I picked World Turnin', the Lindsey Buckingham great song, which wasn't really a single for them or anything, off their first record with Lindsey and Stevie in the band. I did like 4 acoustic guitar parts to a click track and tambourine in the studio, being true to what Lindsey kind of had done. Great song and amazing guitar parts. And so I had like 4 or 5 or 6 guitar parts with shakers and tambourines and a click track. And I sent it up to Sandy in Oregon to put a drum part on. And, we sent it to, and then we played a gig in Colorado and John and Steve came in the studio. The record took about a year to make, but we're all over the country, and to try to get the 5 of us together in the studio is really hard to do.
Yeah.
So some of the songs we played together, and some of them were made one at a time, kind of flying in by email.
So it must have been rewarding to kind of hear everything as it comes in, slowly assemble, and this,
right. And you know what? For instance, back to the Heart song.
Mm-hmm.
Once we started that song, I realized that What About Love, our version of the Heart song, sounded fairly similar to Firefall's 1978 hit Strange Way, with the flute and the dunk, 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 the bass part. And we played that up. because I really wanted that to sound like a Firefall song, even though it's a hard song and John's singing it. And he is such a great vocalist. Me as producer of the record, and I'm the third guy in the vocal blend singing most of the harmony parts, the low parts. But as producer, I didn't even care if I sang on this record, really, because those guys were just so good. And, doing harmony vocals with them, it was just really great. And I know how to make good Firefall records after 40 years or 50 years of being in the band. And the challenge to keep true to these songs and the time and, honoring that, particularly the 70s with the music that came, that people listen to. I don't think there'll ever be another 1970s for the variety and the wonderful, music that came out. And one of the reasons, by the way, is in the 70s, well, first of all, best band ever was the Beatles. And we all learned, and, all the bands in the 70s kind of learned, wow, you can write your own songs and play them and sound like you sound, without any other outside interference. And in the 70s, the stranglehold that record labels would have on bands in the 80s and further down about, wow, we don't hear a single, or we want you to do these songs, or we want, it was a lot more open, and bands could do what they did. And, whether it was the Eagles or Dan Fogelberg or Little River Band or Firefall or any one of those great bands, and even particularly in the 70s, a couple of my favorite bands were Steely Dan, totally unique and different. Little Feat, oh my God, Lowell George and Little Feat, or, the band, to me, we got to do the last band tour a lot opening for them before they went out to, to California and made the last waltz. And night after night after night, I'd sit behind the curtain, maybe 10 feet away from Levon Helm, and just watch and listen and go, oh my God, this is historic, unbelievable.
Amazing.
And it's something too, like you said, I mean, that idea, the AOR format is sort of given a bad rap, but I think that idea of artists, like you said, from that era, to be given a palette of 45 minutes or an hour to do what they want. And it, like you said, it doesn't come down to a 2.5 minute song, and it's got to grab you, and it's got to, like, this is designed for you to listen to as a piece, almost as a whole, where you guys get to go different places, and it seems like you get a lot more freedom to try stuff.
Right.
In some regard.
I really, particularly like as a lead guitar player, I wanted to honor those guys that I was, playing the solos on their songs, like Dan Fogelberg or Leonard Skinner or Toy Caldwell of Marsha Tucker, or Poco. The Poco song we picked, I wasn't sure that Heart of the Night was the right song to do, but Steven said, yeah, I really want to sing that one. And of course, Firefall doesn't have a pedal steel guitar player in the band. And, we got to be really, really good friends with the late, great Rusty Young and Paul Cotton, who both died within a few months of each other many years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. And I just figured, well, I didn't even listen to their version of Heart of the Night. Mm-hmm. I knew the song really well. I knew the chords. I kind of thought, well, I'm a good slide player. I can kind of play Rusty's hook line, on slide. And then there's the sax. And we just tried to do it justice. And, I really like our version of that song.
Well, and the other thing that occurred to me when you look down the list of bands that you're doing their material and the songwriters that you're working with, you're friends with some of these folks. So never mind an audience liking the song and being like, oh, they did that right. They did a nice take on it. It's not a carbon copy, but it doesn't go so far out. Chris Hillman will maybe get in touch and say, hey, I heard what you did to my song. Or Mick Fleetwood might just give you a jingle. That's got to be
that.
Well, it's got to be an added pressure.
I got to know Mick pretty well.
Right.
I never met Lindsey Buckingham. I only met Christine McVie, rest her soul, one time. You know, Stevie Nicks came and sat in with Firefall a couple of times in LA. But yeah, that was the concept. And we got to be friends. You know, we got to be friends with these bands and open for them, you know, and one of the best gigs I ever played. I mean, Fleetwood Mac Rumors, they were like by far the biggest band in the world at that time. And we played in our hometown of Boulder, Colorado at Folsom Stadium, at CU Folsom Stadium. The bill was Fleetwood Mac Rumors, Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band, and Firefall. And it was just astounding to go play in front of 70,000 people in your hometown with all these appreciative fans there to see the biggest band in the world, where 2 years earlier, Firefall had been playing a little club in Boulder called the Good Earth, perfecting our sound, about to go to Criteria Studios in Miami to make our first album. And you're going, wow, how things change in 2 years.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I have to add to that, the main thing that a band needs is the song or the songs. And then you need the singer to sing them. You know, lead guitar players are kind of a dime a dozen. I'm a really good lead guitar player, but, you know, everything I ever played, I was jazz and classically trained. And I learned early on from my world famous jazz guitar teacher, Johnny Smith, when I was in Colorado Springs. Even at 12 or 13 years old, I was watching and listening. I don't know if he ever told me this, but as a soloist, when you've taken a solo, if you want to be tasty and play a tasteful solo, a lot of times it's not what you play, it's what you don't play. And it's the space between notes that really sets up the next thing you play. Kind of like Miles Davis, you know, he'd play one note and people would be going, wow, you know.
Yeah.
So I've always, as a lead guitar player, my main function and my main goal was to enhance the song. And when the solo happened or the licks after the vocals or whatever would happen, you know, I wanted to play the best thing spontaneously and right brain that I could play to help the song, you know. And lead guitar players, as we all know, a lot of them are just all over the place and try to show off and play fast and be impressive. And it's like, it's not about that at all, you know. And that was why it was great in Firefall to have David on flute or sax to be able to play off of or go new directions, you know. It was just great. And Firefall's always been a really melodic band with great vocals and great musicianship, but it's all about the songs.
I feel like that's something the songwriters would always say, like everything should be done in service of the song. And it's great that you guys sort of approached all of these songs with that sort of feeling, right, and that vibe. You know, and the other thing too, you mentioned earlier, doing the Burrito Brothers songs. Again, you played with Graham Parsons, correct?
I did. I had the great fortune of falling into Graham Parsons, Emmylou Harris, and the Fallen Angels right when they started their first and only tour. And unbelievable. I didn't realize how historic that was going to end up being, because after our tour ended, and Graham and Emmylou went out to LA to make Graham's second solo record, Grievous Angel. Sadly, after Graham finished his last lead vocal on that record, he went out to party in Joshua Tree with his ex-girlfriend and ended up killing himself, ODing, and, you know, the end of an era for, you know, the young country music genre that was coming up.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was one of my biggest breaks ever.
I mean, you talk about standing backstage with the band and watching, you know, Lee Von Helm play and Garth Hudson and all these guys play.
Oh man.
Just to be on stage and watch the vocal trade-off between Emmylou Harris and Graham Parsons. I mean, you front row seat to some of the greatest vocals ever.
Right.
And
in
some
fact,
of the great
I'll tell you a
songwriters.
quick story.
Please.
I felt, so I met Rick Roberts in New York City when Graham and Emmylou and I played in New York City. Rick Roberts, who had replaced Graham Parsons in the Flying Breeder Brothers, a year earlier when he was in the Breeder Brothers, or maybe a year and a half or something, they were playing in Washington, D.C., and he heard about that he better go to this club and hear this female singer sing. And he, after their gig, went to the club in D.C. and was astounded by how great Emmylou Harris was. And she was unknown. So he basically discovered her, and he called Chris Hillman after their gig and said, "Chris, you got to come down and hear this gal." And Chris said, "I'm in bed. How dare you call me this late?" And Rick said, no, seriously, take a cab, come down here. You got to see Emmylou. And Chris gets out of bed and gets dressed and goes down to the club, and they're just like, oh, and, a few days or weeks later, Chris Hillman calls his buddy Graham Parsons in California and says, "I think we might have found the gal you're looking for to sing with." And sure enough, now where this story kind of is going is the intertwining nature of a lot of those Southern California rock stars and bands and all this kind of stuff was really amazing. So I met Rick Roberts in New York. We realized, you live in Boulder? I live in Boulder. Hey, we should get together. A few months later, Rick and I started jamming together on his songs. And he thought that he was going to make a third solo record. But as soon as Mark Andes joined into the jam sessions, it didn't feel like a solo record anymore. It kind of felt like a band. And Rick Roberts said, "I know this guy in Washington, D.C. named Larry Burnett, who sings great, writes great songs. He and I blend really good together. Do you want to hear a song?" And Mark and I went, "Yeah, sure." And of course, this was years before cassette tapes had been, invented.
Right.
He puts on a reel-to-reel tape, and the first song that Mark and I heard of Larry's was Cinderella, and we went, "Oh my God!"
Yeah.
Which Cinderella Larry wrote when he was 16 years old, which is astounding to me.
God.
We said, "Get him out here," and the end of this part of the story is that when Larry came out, we didn't have a name of the band. We didn't have a gig. We didn't have a drummer yet. We were just kind of sitting in with local drummers a month or two before Michael Clark joined the band, Michael Clark from the Byrds. Yeah. And that first week of practice, we had 20 to 25 original songs by Rick Roberts and Larry Burnett to work out. And Mark and I were just in song heaven, I'll tell you. It was astounding. And we didn't have to try to sound like Firefall. The combination of the players playing those songs that were presented to us, 4 or 5 of those songs a year and a half later would be in our first album, Mexico, It Doesn't Matter, Living Ain't Living, Cinderella, a lot of those songs. So that was amazing, because what band that starts up and puts together the pieces has that many songs to work out from the get-go? I mean, I've been in plenty of new bands where you don't know what you're going to sound like. You don't know what songs you're going to play. You're going to just try to get together and jam a little bit. Firefall had our sights set really high from that first week. Now, let me tell you the story that I was actually going to have this kind of morph into. So when I fell into Graham's band in Boulder, they wanted James Burton, who played all the guitar on Graham's GP album. And of course, Elvis Presley would say, "You're not going out with anybody else." So, and they wanted Clarence White, but he was in the Byrds. So they didn't really have a guitar player. And they, at the last minute, added this guy, got in the bus and came to their first gig on the road in Boulder, Colorado, my hometown. And I remember the manager of this club that they were playing at told me, "You should get down here. These guys are looking for a guitar player, and hey, you might get a gig." Well, I went and heard them, fell in love with Emmylou. She was just astounding. They played 2 nights. The second night, I was invited to sit in with them. And it's funny because they needed a really good rhythm guitar player. They needed a good rock lead guitar player. And they needed a great country picker, which I wasn't. But they took a band vote, and I was 2 out of 3. And the guy they had then was 0 out of 3. So, hey, 2 out of 3 won.
Ain't bad.
And I got hired. And the next morning at 9 a.m., I left for a 1.5-month long tour. And the second gig we played, the first gig was at Armadillo headquarters in Austin, Texas, the world famous Armadillo. And then the second gigs we played was in Liberty Hall in Houston. And on the last night of that stand in Houston, we're playing on stage, and onto the stage walks Neil Young and Linda Ronstadt. And I'm going, oh, 4 days earlier, I had been painting apartments in my apartment building to make rent, trying to find a gig. I was between gigs then. And I'm now on stage with Neil and Linda. After the songs that they sat in on, Neil Young said, hey, man, come on back to my hotel suite. We'll have a party. And so the 3 bands, Neil Young's band, Linda Ronstadt's band, and Emmylou Harris's band, Graham Parsons and Emmylou Harris's band, all went back. Now, this night was the first night that Linda and Emmylou ever met or sang together. And when we got back to Neil's, hotel suite in Houston, Texas in 1973, Graham Parsons, as he was always wont to do, grabbed the guitar of Neil's and started playing like 20 or 25, country songs, by the Louvin brothers and all these people I'd never heard of before. And Linda and Emmylou sat about 5 or 6 feet away from him, put their faces together 6 inches apart, and blended their voices in harmony for the very first time. And everybody there in that hotel suite, it was obviously amazingly magical, but we all knew it was pretty historic. Wow. Linda and Emmylou singing the first time, and with Graham Parsons, who would be, not with us that very, very much later. So that's an amazing deal. And it just kind of goes to show the intertwining nature, and the Eagles and the Flying Burrito Brothers and Buffalo Springfield and the Byrds. And, it's like, wow, unbelievable.
Well, and that's, as we wrap up, one of the things that I love is this tour you guys are doing this fall. Because it's you, Pure Prairie League, and Richie Furay. I can never from Buffalo Springfield. That's you talk about the bills that the Firefall has been on. That's a pretty good lineup of that's a good night, basically, is what I'm saying.
And you know what? In the spring of 2024, we're doing 3 or 4 gigs with the bill Don Felder of the Eagles, Firefall, and Jim Messina. Hey, can't beat that with the stick. Yeah, man, it's really great. And to be in a position to be in a band, a really good band with great vocals and a sound, and we still sell tickets, and we still get airplay. To be in a position to make a friends and family album of other people's songs, doing that time and those bands honor by including them. What an amazing, thing for me to be able to do. And I'll give you a scoop. I'm already starting Friends and Family 2.
Ooh.
And we're picking the songs. And we already had done So You Want to Be a Rock and Roll Star by the Byrds. And I didn't want to put 2 Byrds songs on this first album. So we're putting Rockstar on the next album, and probably I'm going to ask John Jorgensen to play 12-string on that one too. And we got a couple songs picked, and the only one I'll mention is we're doing Love the One You're With by Stephen Stills. So it's just such a great thing to be able to try to make an album and honor that time and those bands, and be in a position to, because I know a lot of people who aren't my age and are 60s or 70s they're not really familiar that much with Buffalo Who, Firefall Who, it's like,
right.
So to be able, this is kind of a historic thing to be able to play those songs in a Firefall manner, being true to the songs, but it's educational for people who are 20s or 30s and who didn't live through the 70s.
Down around the corner, half a mile from here, you see them old trains running, and you watch them disappear. Without love, where would you be now?
Friends and family, the new album by Firefall is available right now wherever you get your music. For more information and for tour dates, check out their website, firefallofficial.com.
You can check us out on all the various socials. Be sure to visit our website at rockandrollgradschool.com, and don't forget to leave us a review.
Today's show is produced by myself and Heidi Hedquist. Our reluctant producers are John Sauvé and Sandy Stone. Our willing producers are Rachel Allen and Randy Jeanette. Our intern is Zach Jackson. This one's for Philippe. Thank you, good night, and may all your favorite bands stay together.
Well, the Illinois Central and the Southern Central Freight, you gotta keep on pushing, mama. You know they're